Vegetable gardening in Hawaii is not easy. For the most part, you have to do a lot to get certain things to grow here. Sometimes you have to go so far as build a special house to grow veggies in that'll keep the rain and the bugs out. It's crazy the lengths you have to go through to find success in the garden here. That's why I put most of my focus on a perennial food forest system where I plant plants that want to grow here. But there's still room for some of those other more finicky crops such as tomatoes, broccoli, cabbages, cucumbers. The only thing is, I've never really had that much success growing those crops here in my garden until I learned a simple trick. You see, a tomato is not just a tomato. You got Roma tomatoes, you have black Krim tomatoes, you have Cavallo tomatoes, you got cherry tomatoes, you got large slicing tomatoes, you have all sorts of tomatoes. And each one of those varieties likes to grow in a different microclimate. And it just so happens that not all of them want to grow in yours. And that's why it's important to choose the right variety when you're growing certain vegetables here in the tropics. And today I'm going to share with you some of the varieties that did well for me in the past, as well as some of the varieties that I plan on seeding out here in the future. And if you happen to have any varieties that have done really well for you where you live, please let us know down in the comments below. The more that we can learn from each other, the more success that we'll all find in the garden. And make sure you all stay to the end because I'll have a special gift for you. Now, before we get into things, it's important to note that the variety is not the only factor that'll determine whether or not a plant will grow. Timing is pretty key as well. Some crops love to grow in the winter, others over the summer, and others can grow all year. So it's really important that you pick the right variety and you choose the right time to grow it in your garden. There's other factors involved as well, but those are some pretty key ones to keep in mind today. And if you want more information on when to plant what, you should really pick up my new ebook, Month to Month in the Tropical Garden, which has all sorts of information on when to plant what. I'll leave a link for it down in the description below. Now let's start with some of those varieties, shall we? I think we should start with beans and peas. They're a pretty common crop in the vegetable garden, and a lot of them do great here in the tropics, but not all of them. Some of the best ones that do well here are some perennial beans such as the wing bean or the perennial lima bean. They both thrive in our humid climate, but there's some annual varieties that we can choose as well. There's the Moana Wonder and there's the yardlong bean, which is one that I really love. They've always grown really great for me and sometimes grow for multiple seasons. And if you're looking to try and grow snap peas, which tend to like cooler weather, you can try out the Moana sugar snap pea, which can tolerate our heat a little bit more out here. Now when it comes to brassicas, they can be a little bit more trickier. I have great success growing pretty much any type of collard and lacinato kale, but when it comes to broccoli or cabbages, I tend to not do as well. I tried growing cabbages a few years back and the cabbage worms just decimated every single one that I was growing. And I kind of gave up on those guys. But this year I'm going to try out an Asian variety of cabbage, the Wong bok cabbage, which should do a little bit better against those cabbage worms. And this year I'm going to experiment with a new variety of broccoli that I've heard grows really well out here in the wet tropics. The variety is called Kirikakaba, and it tends to really hold its flowering heads well here in the tropics, and it does not bolt like most other broccoli varieties do. We'll see how both of those go this year. Now, if I was going to grow lettuce in my garden, which I don't because we have rat lungworm disease, and I tend to not grow any sort of vegetable plant that is eaten raw, that's just for safety's sake. And if you live in a rat lung zone area, I advise you to do the same. But if you don't, then there's some great lettuce varieties that have been bred that will thrive in our hot, humid, tropical climate. Some of my favorites that I've had have been the Nui Nui lettuce and the Moana lettuce. The Moana lettuce is a really rich, buttery lettuce, and I just love that lettuce on top of a hamburger and even in salads. Now, something I really want to grow at my place this year that I haven't been growing for a really long time is onions. Now, I don't have the space to grow out bulbing onions, so I'm going to plant some green onions. And one of the best varieties to grow out here in the tropics is the Koba green onion. Those really thrive out here in the tropics. And I just picked up some Koba green onion seeds from the UHC lab, and I'm excited to give them a try. We'll see how they do. But if you do have the space and climate to grow out some bulb onions, there's some varieties that I think you should try. The Granex and Avahia are two bulb onion varieties that tend to do pretty well here in Hawaii. Now you got to be sure that you plant them at the right time of the year because onions are pretty particular to the weather and the available daylight. So choosing the right variety and planting them at the right time is pretty key to finding success when growing onions here in the tropics. Now I don't know about you, but most gardeners, they want a good looking tomato to be coming out of their vegetable garden. And why not? Tomatoes are one of the most popular crops that people grow in the backyard garden. And it's pretty easy to have success growing tomatoes in the tropics as long as you're planting the right variety in the right conditions. You see, cherry tomatoes kind of grow wild out here in the lower elevations where it's hotter and drier. But when we get higher up in elevation, we need to baby tomatoes a little bit more. Perhaps have a covered area to keep all that rainfall off of them, and maybe a little bit of protection from all the pests that love to attack tomatoes. And if you have those things in place, you can choose certain varieties that'll give you a little bit more chance of success. As I said, cherry tomatoes grow really well here, and one of the best that has been bred here on the island of Hawai'i is the Komohana cherry tomato. That one kind of grows like a weed, especially down by the coast. That's a tomato that I encourage you to try if you're a beginning gardener. And as for those trickier slicing tomatoes, some of the good tomato varieties to start with would be Heilani, Old Brooks, and Cavallo. Plant a few of those and hopefully you'll be swimming in tomatoes by summer. Now something I miss swimming in is zucchini. Zucchini grows like a freaking weed out on the mainland, but here in Hawaii, it doesn't really want to grow at all. It seems like every single pest wants to attack zucchini, and any little bit of moisture encourages the downy mildew to show up. But lucky for us, there are varieties that have been bred to handle those things a little bit better. And one that I found success with a couple years back was the Dunja variety of zucchini. All right, last but not least, we have herbs. Herbs are the essence of our cooking. They are so important, but sometimes overlooked. But here in the tropics, we can grow a whole variety of herbs, just as long as you're willing to accept a substitute. Many types of herbs that we're used to growing are used to growing in Mediterranean climates, such as cilantro, rosemary, and thyme, and they do not do too great in the wet tropics. But there are alternatives. We have culantro and Vietnamese cilantro, which are pretty similar to the cilantro that we're used to having. We also have Mexican oregano, which you can grow in place of the typical Greek oregano. And if you're willing to change the recipes that you're used to cooking, we have all such other herbs such as lemongrass, galangal, allspice, cinnamon. Gosh, there's so many other ones out there, I can't even think of any right now. But you get my gist. There are a lot of herbs that we can grow in the garden, but we have to adjust what we're used to growing. And that goes for a lot of the vegetables that we grow in our annual gardens out here in the tropics. We have to adjust from what we're used to growing if you're used to growing on the mainland or a more temperate climate. If you're here in the tropics, there's varieties of plants that love to thrive in the tropics. And in order to find success in the garden, you need to be planting those varieties. And as a special gift for those of you who made it this far in the video, I have a downloadable cheat sheet that has all the varieties that I mentioned today in this video, as well as many more. Look for the link in the description down below. Now, choosing the right varieties is the easy part. Actually growing them is where things get hard. Now, I bet you might be interested in a video that shows you exactly how to grow a lot of these varieties that I'm talking about. If that's you, I made a video showing off how we're going to get some of these seed varieties started for my new spring garden here at my homestead. I encourage you to check it out. Once again, everybody, thanks for watching today. I appreciate it. Ahui ho.